It was a cold, blustery day when Thomas arrived at the lighthouse. The wind whipped with the waves against the rocks, sending sprays of salt water high into the air. The lighthouse, tall and imposing, stood at the edge of a cliff, its white walls streaked with years of exposure to the elements. Thomas had taken the job of lighthouse keeper, a position that had been vacant since the last keeper, a man named Elias. He disappeared without a trace. As Thomas approached the heavy wooden door, he felt a strange sense of foreboding. The door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit interior. The air inside was cool and damp, and the smell of salt and old wood filled his nostrils. He set down his bag and took a deep breath, knowing that this world would be home for the foreseeable future. The first few days were uneventful. Thomas busied himself with daily tasks of maintaining the light, keeping the lenses clean, and ensuring that the beacon shone brightly through the fog. Isolation didn't bother him. He had always been a solitary man, content with his own company. But as the days turned into nights, and nights stretched on, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was not quite right. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Thomas decided to explore the lighthouse more thoroughly. He had noticed a small door at the back of the building, partially hidden behind a stack of old crates. It was locked, but with a little effort, he managed to force it open. Inside, he found a narrow staircase leading down into the darkness. Thomas descended the staircase slowly, his footsteps echoing off the stone walls. The air grew colder as he went deeper, and the sound of the wind outside faded, until all he could hear was the beating of his own heart. At the bottom of the stairs, he found himself in a small, circular room. The walls were lined with shelves, each one filled with old books and papers. In the center of the room was a large wooden desk, covered in a thick layer of dust. On the desk, he found a leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age. He opened it carefully, his eyes scanning the neat handwriting that filled the pages. The journal belonged to Elias, the previous lighthouse keeper, and it detailed his time at the lighthouse. But as Thomas read on, the entries became more and more erratic. Elias wrote of strange things: light in the sky, voices in the wind, and the feeling of being watched. He described dreams that felt too real and shadows that moved on their own. The final entries were filled with cryptic messages, as if Elias had been trying to communicate something important, but his thoughts had become too fragmented to make sense. There were also maps drawn with meticulous detail, showing hidden passages within the lighthouse and symbols that Thomas didn't recognize. Intrigued, Thomas spent the next few days exploring the passages mentioned in the journal. They led to various parts of the lighthouse, some of which he hadn't known existed. But it wasn't until he found a small trapdoor beneath the floorboards in one of the rooms that he realized just how deep the mystery went. The trapdoor led to a hidden chamber, and what he found there would change everything. The hidden chamber was unlike anything Thomas had ever seen. The walls were covered in strange symbols, and in the center of the room was a large stone pedestal. On the top of the pedestal was an ornate box made of dark, polished wood and inlaid with silver. The box was locked, but the key was in the lock, as if it had been left there for him to find. With a sense of trepidation, Thomas turned the key and opened the box. Inside, he found a small, glowing orb, pulsing with a soft, ethereal light. As he reached out to touch it, the light intensified, and he was suddenly overwhelmed by a vision. He saw the lighthouse as it had been centuries ago, standing guard over a small village that had long since disappeared. He saw ships sailing through the night, guided by the lights of the beacon, and he saw something else, something ancient and powerful, hidden deep beneath the waves. The vision faded, and Thomas found himself back in the chamber, the orb still glowing in his hand. He realized that the lighthouse was more than just a beacon for ships. It was a getaway, a portal to another world. The journal had mentioned this, but Elias had been too afraid to explore it fully. Thomas, however, was determined to uncover the truth. He spent hours in the chamber, studying the symbols on the walls and the maps in the journal. Slowly, he began to piece together the story of the lighthouse and its true purpose. It had been built on a nexus of energy, a place where the fabric of reality was thin, allowing for passage between worlds. The orb was the key, a tool that could open the getaway and allow access to the other side. As Thomas delved deeper into the mystery, he became obsessed with the idea of using the orb to explore the other world. He spent days preparing, gathering supplies, and making sure the lighthouse was in order. Finally, the night came when he felt ready. The storm outside was raging, the wind howling and the waves crashing against the rocks with a fury that shook the entire structure. Thomas stood in the hidden chamber, the orb in his hand, and recited the incantation he had found in the journal. The symbols on the wall began to glow, and the air around him seemed to hum with energy. The orb pulled brighter and brighter until, with a flash of light, a portal opened before him. Through the portal, he could see another world, a world of endless darkness, lit only by the faint glow of distant stars. With a deep breath, Thomas stepped through the portal. The air on the other side was cold and still, and the ground beneath his feet felt solid but unfamiliar. He was in a vast, open space, surrounded by towering structures, that seemed to be made of stone and metal. The sky above was a swirling mass of clouds and stars, and the only sound was the faint whisper of the wind. As he explored the alien landscape, Thomas realized that this world was not entirely uninhabited. He could see shapes moving in the distance, figures that seemed to be watching him from the shadows. He approached one of the structures and found a door similar to one in the lighthouse. When he opened it, he was met with a scene that took his breath away. Inside the structure was a room filled with more orbs, each one glowing with a different color. They were arranged in a circle around a large stone altar, on which was carved with same symbols that he had seen in the lighthouse. As he approached the altar, the orbs began to pulse in unison, and he felt a strange sensation, as if the ground beneath him was shifting. Suddenly, the air around him grew thick with a presence, something ancient and powerful, yet familiar. The orbs pulsed faster, and Thomas felt a rush of energy as the symbols on the altar began to glow. In a moment of clarity, he realized that the lighthouse had been built to protect this world, to keep whatever was on the other side from crossing over. But now, the barrier was weakening. The figures in the distance began to move closer, and Thomas could see them more clearly. They were humanoid, but their features were distorted, as if they were not fully formed. They moved with a fluid grace, their bodies shifting and changing with each step. As they approached, Thomas felt a surge of fear, but also a strange sense of recognition, as if he had seen them before. The figures stopped at the edge of the circle of orbs, watching him with eyes that glowed with an inner light. One of them stepped forward, raising a hand in a gesture of peace.
"You should not be here,"
it said, its voice a soft whisper that echoed in his mind.
"The getaway must remain close. The balance must be maintained."
Thomas felt a surge of guilt and fear. He had been so focused on uncovering the lighthouse secrets that he hadn't considered the consequences.
I didn't mean to disrupt anything.
He said, his voice trembling.
I just wanted to understand.
The figure nodded slowly.
"We know,
It said,
but now that you are here, you must help us restore the balance."
The orbs pulled in unison again, and the ground beneath him began to shake. The portal he had entered through began to flicker and fade, and Thomas realized that if he didn't act quickly, he would be trapped in this world forever.
What do I need to do?
He asked, his voice steady despite the fear he was feeling. The figure pointed to the altar.
"You must return the orb to its place.
It said,
It is the key to keeping the getaway closed. If it's not returned, the barrier will fall, and our worlds will collide."
Thomas nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. He carefully placed the orb on the altar, and as soon as he did, the orbs around him began to glow brighter, their light filling the room. The ground stopped shaking, and the portal stabilized, its edges solidifying once more. The figures in the room bowed their heads in gratitude, and Thomas felt a wave of relief wash over him. He had done it. He had restored the balance, but as he turned to leave, the figure spoke again.
"Remember,
It said,
the lighthouse is more than just a beacon. It's a guardian. And now, so are you.
With those words echoing in his mind, Thomas stepped through the portal and found himself back in the hidden chamber of the lighthouse. The air was thick with the scent of salt and old wood, and the sound of the storm raging outside was a welcome reminder that he was home. But something had changed. The lighthouse felt different, as if it was alive, watching over him as he watched over it. In the days that followed, Thomas resumed his duties as the lighthouse keeper, but the knowledge of what lay beyond the portal never left his mind. He kept Elias' journal close, reading it every night as the light from the beacon swept across the dark ocean. He realized that Elias had known about the lighthouse's true purpose, but had been too afraid to act on it. In the end, his fear had consumed him, leading to his disappearance. Thomas, however, was determined not to let the same fear befall him. He embraced his role as the guardian of the lighthouse, knowing that the balance between worlds depended on him. He kept the orb hidden in the chamber, knowing that it was the key to keeping the getaway closed. And every night, as the storm raged outside, he felt the presence of the figures from the other world, watching over him as he watched over them. As long as Thomas remained it, the lighthouse had always been a place of mystery, but now it was also a place of power. As long as Thomas remained its keeper, the secret of the lighthouse would remain safe. The winds howled, the waves crashed, and the light continued to shine, a beacon in the darkness, guiding lost souls home. It was a tale of a mystery, bravery, and a delicate balance between worlds. As you drift off to sleep, let the sound and soothing music carry you to a place of peace and tranquility. Close your eyes, relax, and let the story fade into the night, leaving you with a deep and restful sleep.